first live attempt at doing a YouTube live on the Chaos Chamber. My name is Mark Vincent, and I'm joined by my friend Fika Vanderhoek, and we're going to talk about all kinds of weird things, music and consciousness related. We just did a talk the other day for Treadwells online, which was pretty good, I think, wasn't it?
It was awesome. I really enjoyed myself. Yeah,
pretty enjoyable. So we got into lots of different things about the occult and music, and we're going to do the same here. So where do you want to start, I guess?
I mean, let's find a nice way to get ourselves into the rabbit hole of consciousness where we've been waiting or wanting to go into for a while now. But how to go there in a way that kind of makes sense.
Well, I've got quite fixed views on it. I suppose maybe, well, not fixed. Like maybe the place to start is to kind of define, kind of lay out what we mean by it.
Yeah, but what I mean is, I mean, why would we even talk about this? Is it like useful or interesting to talk about it in the context of art, for example?
So, because I think a lot of the time we're talking about the effect it has on us this is where it gets really difficult. Basically, I'll be very broad. It's like the music has an effect on you, and it has an emotional effect, it has a physical effect, and as we talked about a lot, it seems to have something else going on, especially when you're playing. And if you didn't have any internal experience, which is consciousness, you wouldn't be aware of any of that. So it seems to sort of directly, it does something weird to your internal experience. That's kind of why I think it's worth discussing. So it produces, you get certain emotions when you're listening to it, obviously. But I think the bit that really interests me is we tried to talk about this a lot before, when you're performing and you kind of go somewhere else.
Right.
And what is that? And where's that coming from? And this idea of the observing mind, the fact that you seem to be watching yourself doing things.
And for you, that has to do with consciousness.
Oh yeah, completely and utterly. Yeah. So, shall I kind of go and you ask me some things, or?
Okay,
Go on then.
I have one more link to make this whole consciousness thing relevant, which is a totally different angle for me.
Okay.
Because the subject of our talks is on art and magic, right? Yeah. The whole idea of why anyone would even practice magic is, or at least what is generally accepted as the definition of magic is to make changes to one's consciousness in accordance with one's will.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And in order, I mean, if then everyone seems to somehow have an idea about what that is, consciousness, right? Everyone, or at least humans tend to think they at least have one. There's different opinions about consciousness in animals and even in plants. And now science takes this thing to a whole new level, and this is what we're going to talk about. But why for me it's interesting is that the nature of your consciousness, you can change your own consciousness. For me, that's what magic is about, to change your own consciousness, and by doing that you make changes in the world because it has effects outside of yourself.
Yeah.
You can also have an effect, definitely as an artist, and you should consider this effect not just through your art, but you can have an effect on the consciousness of your audience, and how they are going to view your art depends on the nature of their consciousness. So if you want them to be in a certain mood, for example, you can guide them through some pre-planned ordeal in order to shake them up or to calm them down. I mean, my favorite example artist, Marina Abramovic, would put all people in lab coats and make them give away their phones and everything, make them walk around in a big space with noise cancelling headphones on for an hour, and only then they could like view the art.
Yeah.
So that's the thing for me that makes this whole consciousness subject super interesting and relevant. And we kind of, you told me about what science was discovering about consciousness, and it literally blew my mind, because if this is true, if this is true, what you could do with that as an artist, as a magician, I think is pretty huge.
Yeah. Was that the Donald Hoffman stuff that I was talking about with the virtual reality, the way.
Also, yes, but also the idea that everything is consciousness.
Yeah, that's where I've kind of landed on it. That's not that's kind of where it adds up to me, because and that's why it interests me so much. Again, this sort of, so I view everything as, so I think consciousness is what's called irreducible. Like, you can't break it down into something else.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's fundamental. And the reason, maybe if I explain how I came to that conclusion, or kind of why I came to that conclusion. I've never liked the idea of mind and body being separate. And so in philosophy, I would be what's known as a materialist or a physicalist. So I think that consciousness is physical. I think it's a thing. And the only explanation, so the explanation that kind of held up, was Donald Hoffman's idea that you're basically rendering reality in the way that's most conducive to your survival. So what magic seems to allow you to do is manipulate that. So
right. I think you elaborate on the thing where, because this is interesting, that the whole kind of idea that your the interface of life is kind of that way, just because you needed to see things this way in order to survive.
Yeah.
What was the example with the Australian bug?
It's the Australian jewel beetle. So it all comes about. I'll try and remember it in order. So it all comes about from observations around a thing called the Australian jewel beetle, that was nearly wiped out by a beer company, who started producing bottles that were the same shape and color as the female jewel beetle. And so the males started trying to mate with these bottles. And it sounds hilarious, but they were nearly annihilated inside a year, and they had to stop producing them. And what this seemed to indicate was that their way of rendering reality, let's call it that for the minute, was subject to a few really simple evolutionary rules. If it's this shape and red, it's probably female. So it's it's a beetle, so the rules are relatively simple, but that indicates, first off, internal experience, that it's responding to something on the outside. But this led Hoffman on to do some experiments around evolutionary game theory.
Right. Yep.
So he used computer modeling, and the short version is they modeled artificial species inside a computer, and I don't know exactly how they did it, but they gave some of them the ability to see, quote unquote, what was really there, whereas certain groups of species had a very strong illusionary construct of what was happening.
Yep.
And the ones who could see what was really there died out very fast. And that kind of really, and he calls it mind user interface. So basically, he sees that your brain, your mind is a way of interfacing with reality. So that's kind of the first exposure I had to it, and I really kind of sat on that idea of like, okay, if you're not rendering it in a way, if people spend a lot of time in magic trying to find out what's really there, right? And I don't think there is anything really there, because, and even if you could see what was really there, what would you do with it? Because it seems that, like, so like if you're sending an email on a computer, you can't see what's really happening in the computer. What you see is,
you will not understand any of it.
Yeah, because it's electrons being sent up and down. And when you go down, and so what you have on the screen is an image rendered using photons and I can't think of all the technical terms for it, light and color that you can perceive. Right. So you have an icon that you can interface with, so the little email button. So to extrapolate out from that, your face that I'm seeing on the screen is an icon through which I can interface with your consciousness. And to the point where so I'm rendering you in a way that I understand, because that's all I can do.
That makes all perceivable reality completely relative.
Yes, yeah, and it
while pronouncing these words, I think they actually sound really alike. Reality, relative. Anyway, okay.
Well, it's so there was. No, I'm not sure if I've got this 100%, but fairly recently, a couple of guys won the Nobel Prize for demonstrating that objects are not locally real. So, like, you remember when you may have done this when you were a kid, and you sort of look, you turn your back on somebody, and you wonder, are they still there?
Oh yeah.
Right. So the answer is no, not really. They exist as an unrendered form, right? So it's not that they disappear, but it's like when you play a computer game and you've got a character on the screen and you look away from the character, they are there, but they're not in that form anymore because they're not being rendered on the screen. So they exist as a bunch of code.
Right.
And that, and again, I'm only going on what Hoffman said, and these are just my conclusions that I've drawn, and may well change my mind in a couple of years, but don't quote me on that. That seems to make sense to me as to what's happening, because it explains a lot of things. It explains magical experience, right? So if my mind is rendering this, and also Hoffman thinks, and again, this is just conjecture, this is like a feeling, but it again, it fits, like this idea that my thoughts are literally changing. So it's an interacting system. So by talking to you right now, both our brains are altering.
Right.
And I don't think your brain is generating this. I think your brain is translating it.
Yeah.
So, and to get to that point where your brain's translating it, I can't have separate mind and body anymore. It doesn't work. And so it makes sense to me that actually it's all mind. What we call atoms are that consciousness is kind of, what am I trying to say? So when you get down to a subatomic level, what you have is a bunch of probability clouds in space. There's nothing there.
No.
You know, and so the reason it appears as it does is because we're rendering it so that idea of nothing.
Oh, you're gone there. Is that me? Is it you? What's happening? Ah.
Oh, are you back?
Yeah, no, I was never gone. It was you. I think. I don't know.
Possibly. Oh, well, at least I think I broke the matrix. Okay. So where was I up to? What was the last thing I said before?
You were saying for you that it kind of means everything is mind.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Which isn't a new idea.
No.
It's I think it's referred to as, no, I can't think of the word. There is a term for it. It's so I kind of go the physicalist route to end up the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just it becomes a semantics thing at that point. But these ideas that all things are connected are just different ways of saying, well, actually, matter and mind are inseparable.
For me, like there is no such thing as matter. We only perceive it that way because we need to perceive it that way. We only perceive it that way because we're partly made of it ourselves, and we need to, a table for us is a table because that's how that gets translated through this kind of, interfacing machine. Yeah. But if it's not me looking at it, it doesn't exist as a solid form.
No, there. Yeah, in a nutshell. There you go. You explain it much better than me. But I think also that so as a magician, that kind of what I was always looking for.
I mean, that means the possibilities are basically endless and magic is real, right? To put it really short. I mean, if you can alter your mind or your consciousness, you can alter basically anything, because everything is translated through your consciousness, not necessarily generated. So this is not about manifestation,
no,
in that sense. But
I think I think it goes a little further than magic being real. Magic becomes fundamental. It's just built. It's just built into the system, and again, it's a semantic thing. If it's an interacting system of mind, and we are like discrete agents with that. I mean, this is going to sound awfully pretentious. I think we're the dream of a god, basically.
Yeah.
That's what it's a dream. It's much closer to a dream than people would like to think it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think I'm not in. So I'm not sure anymore what the limits are. I just don't know. You know, and it's the older I get, and kind of the more I look into stuff, and people talk about these things like mindset and just I always wonder like how far it can be taken, you know.
Yeah.
And the answer is probably you've got the bucket out, good. The answer is probably a lot further than we realize.
Yeah.
You know? And so sort of music and art are ways of, not just ways of influencing it, but expression is you're influencing it all the time, but it's a way of influencing in it and having some control over the influence, because I think you don't always feel like you've got, certainly for me, because I'm a control freak, which just makes no sense given what I've said, but it gives me a way of influencing you in a way that I intend to, or at least I can have as much control over the intention, over the means of influence as possible.
Right. I mean, yeah, art speaks to the senses, and for me, in that extent, music is the highest form of art, because to us it is immaterial already.
Yeah, it's pure mind. Yeah, it is. It's
just vibration and nothing else, and we can't perceive it in any other way unless you're this kind of synesthetic person and you see colors with notes and stuff like that. But yeah,
so also synesthesia kind of backs up what we've been saying. It's the age old question of why is it music? Well, it's because your brain translates it to be so.
Exactly, because it only comes in through here. Somehow our eyes are useless of those frequencies. We can see frequencies that are much higher, and those we translate as being light and colors.
Yeah. But if you have synesthesia, you can see it.
Yes.
Which is really weird.
So actually that's saying there's no difference between a color and the sound.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Because they're both probability waveforms, like in a sort of, and I'm hopefully using the correct terms here, but that your brain is translating in a certain way. I mean, light is a wave, acts like a wave and a particle. Sound is definitely a wave, and your brain is, or whatever is going on. And again, it's always interesting to me that we point out our heads. You know, where's your mind? Well, it's in your head. Is it? Right. No. Because if I reach and touch something without looking at it, you know, my perception's still, why is it there? You know, and sorry, you were going to say something.
No, but that translates back to when you experience that thing when playing music and you feel an kind of outer body experience.
Yeah.
Is that then your mind or something else? Is that a split thing?
So there is there was an explanation I read about not multiple personality disorder. There are a couple of papers, and I'll have to find them, written about using this idea of what's called panpsychism, which is the idea that everything contains consciousness. And when I'm talking about consciousness, I mean the internal experience. That if it's not such a leap to think that your personality could be fractious, like there could just be bits of you that come off and make separate bits. You know, we just assume that there's one of us, and like, why? I mean, they're definitely, if you use the two systems model, the human and the animal, which I use all the time, then that's definitely the case that there are two of you.
Yeah.
But I suppose I've talked about it before, this idea of the observing brain. When you have these really weird experiences, there's some bit of you watching.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, I suppose, that's the thing that interests me the most when I play music. Other than everybody cheering. But
I mean, maybe that helps you get there. I don't know.
Not so much these days, because you mentioned it a while ago. Was it? I think it was you that said you felt like it was kind of something was watching you from behind. Is that right?
Yeah, I
you
think
that
that
said that. That like it's sort of an external thing.
Yes.
Well, tell me about that, because that because for me, I don't know where it is. That's the weird thing. So elaborate.
I mean, if I'm really into it and I'm playing and I kind of forget myself, I mean, that's somehow the way I would express that in words. It's like you lose kind of touch with whatever your physical body is telling you, that you're inside that and not outside of that you stop there, that only that is what you can experience. You get separate from the senses, and so that means that you could look to everything in the room without even turning your head, right?
Yeah. Sounds like astral projection.
It's really a little bit like that. I think I did experience that a couple of times when playing. Yeah.
Do you think that that's your mind separating from your body, or extending out, or?
No, I think it's actually because we're not actually in danger anymore, right? We don't necessarily at all times need to interface with the world the way we do in order to survive. You can create moments of exception, and that's what shamans do, right?
Yeah.
And so they use the same kind of techniques as the people that we are doing when we're playing, so that we accidentally snap into a state like that.
Yes.
It's not so weird. And when you think about that, I mean, I really love this idea that everything is consciousness. I mean, that actually means that somewhere my consciousness doesn't need my eyes or whatever in order to see everything that's on every page in this book, because it's all out there.
Yeah.
The information is out there also, and another theory that kind of I have to think about quantum physics and the fact that there is what is the term for this, but if there is atoms, and it doesn't matter how far away they are, but if the one is on the one half of the world and changes state, the one on the other half of the world knows that somehow and also changes state.
Well, non-locality, I think.
That's the one, and they haven't figured it out because it goes faster than the speed of light could.
Yeah.
So that means that every little atom, should know about the location of every other little or particle or whatever, you want to call that. So that means all that information is somehow out there. And if you lose touch with our limited senses, that information is there for you. You can access that. And I've heard of a friend of mine who actually practiced this, and he had a deck of cards, and he could guess 9 times out of 10, and that probability is insane. Insanely low. Right. Which card was next in the deck?
Okay, that's weird.
So it is possible, and I actually, So that for me, I think, is what can happen if you play music and you get into that kind of state.
Yeah. It's interesting that it is like a shamanistic thing where I don't like. It's very hard to describe, because every time we've come across this, I'm always reminded of a question that your friend or our friend Rihanna pointed out. about, because we're constantly talking about being out of body, but how do you?
Yeah.
So, but there's still something attached somewhere, and it becomes, this is where I find it very difficult to explain. Like when I go into that sort of observing mode, I might not be feeling sensation in the standard way, but I'm aware of something.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, you see, at that point, the sentence "I am aware" stops making sense. It's like, what do I mean by I?
Yeah.
You know, who's looking? And that's always fascinating me. It's like, who's watching? Who's looking? And it's like, if you sort of, take a psychedelic trip or something, and even though you can be quite deep in it, there's a bit of you that still knows what's happening, and is kind of dispassionately sitting at the back watching this unfold.
Yeah.
And that has bothered me, for a want of a better word, for a long time. It's like, what is that? Where's it come from? It seems to be constant. And the time I noticed it the most, and it pops up when I'm playing really well, it's kind of this, something is watching as my body plays.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it's doing anything. And the time I noticed it was when the time I really became aware of it is I did a really heavy deadlift, and I nearly blacked out afterwards. I had Tweety birds, right? And I started to see things, and then was aware that there was a bit of my brain just watching it.
Yeah.
It wasn't me though, because I was having it's really hard to describe.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of I don't want to say religions, because that's not what that is, but a lot of spiritual belief systems, call it that way, have many layers of what makes up you, right? Especially the Scandinavian one. I think there's 8 or 9 layers of what makes up you. So I think, the you that is doing the playing is you, but the part that is being aware of that is also still you, but it's a different a different bit.
Yeah, no, it would
you.
make sense. It would make sense. I guess the only thing
I haven't looked into that for a while now. I used to kind of know all these layers, but maybe it would be interesting to take a look at them and see how we feel about that.
That's your homework for next time.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be interesting to look at, because
honestly,
I definitely think that the sort of the parts. I mean, the mind is I think the mind is much more fractious than we think it is, and even to the point where I've kind of entertained the idea, and it's very difficult thing to discuss, but like when you sort of boil it down and you start looking for you, very hard to find. Like where are you? What do you mean by that? And again, it's another thing with music, is it's sort of, I mean, I guess it makes it look a bit more transient. It's sort of, what am I trying to say?
I don't think you can kind of look for yourself. This is why we are alive, to experience that.
Yeah. It's just a sort of a load of feedback. But I think if
yeah, basically it's just bouncing things off of us. In order for us, it's like a big mirror that we're looking in, basically constantly, because the only way we kind of define ourselves is by looking at whatever is other.
Yes.
And at this point, I mean, I don't even know if this is me. I mean, there's enough people who kind of also reject the physical body as a part of who they are.
Yeah,
or what they are, or what is them.
I'm not quite sure where I am with all of this stuff, because I've been thinking about it for a while, because this is what I do.
I mean, it's the interface through which I experience the whole world. It makes up a lot of. I mean, I can't help but rely on whatever it's giving me. I don't have much else, or well, at least the experience where there's more happening than just the physical senses. But maybe, I don't know, even if they are made possible because I have a body, or by whatever is happening in the chemistry of my body, like with drugs. I mean, that state gets made somehow with chemicals in the head. So we do need that material bit really makes up a lot.
Well, you just give me a thought there, actually, because there's a common idea in the occult that this is like a lower plane of existence.
Yeah.
And I don't think it is. And I haven't done for a long. I think this is right at the top. I think this is because it's this idea, but and I think right, and I might be wrong about this, that it's sort of rooted in this Judeo-Christian idea that flesh is bad. Right.
Exactly.
Whereas this may be the only way this experience can be had.
Yeah.
Like this.
I mean,
because but that's again, it's sorry, I'm trying to get it in a straight line. This idea that of like a sort of a more spiritual self.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what would that experience, and why is that better than this?
Yeah.
It's, and I think it sort of, it gets mixed up, and this is why I think it's quite important to consider like what we mean when we talk about consciousness, and when you realize that, as you said, you're kind of wandering through clouds of probability. There's nothing really there in the sense that we think it is. It's just being rendered. Like, what's higher than that?
Mm-hmm.
And what they really mean is, I'll see what's really there. And as we discussed earlier, that's probably not a good idea. because you get wiped out. This is what happens with people who take too many psychedelics. They start, the structure starts to break down. If the structure starts to break down, you can't navigate anymore.
No.
Music
people
allows you to
go mad, basically.
Yeah, and music allows you to create new structures in a controlled fashion.
Yeah.
And direct them. There you go. I just had a clever thought. Thanks. But that's what it's allowing you to do, isn't it?
It only took us about half an hour to get there.
It's all right. It's doing pretty. I mean, this is really complicated, and like, but that's, I think that's the thing. It allows you to introduce controlled structures all the time, because what we're doing is creating structures that people experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose you could introduce like, what is a painter doing? They're probably attempting the same thing using a different medium.
Yeah.
Something like that. Am I making sense, or am I just gibbering? I don't really know.
No, that makes sense to me. It's a really abstract way of putting it. But yeah, that's basically what that boils down to.
Well, magic has always been sort of a way of, it's when people talk about imposing their will.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, I'm paraphrasing there. That's the Crowley thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what do you mean by your will?
Mm-hmm. And how do you, who is the you that is doing the willing? Where does it come from?
Yeah.
Is it the will of some freaky goddess? Some people tend to believe that. How do you know where it's coming from, and whether it's not driven by ego or something else? How do you find out?
Well, I think that, you remember you were talking about that jam session where you were playing with someone and you weren't allowed to move on until you heard the next note.
Right. Yeah.
So something like that brings you a little bit closer to, I don't think there is an answer, but sort of closer to the truth of what's happening there. Because you're kind of being led, aren't you, rather than trying to make it happen.
Yeah, I was not trying to impose any kind of, preconceived ideas or, concrete bits of knowledge or skill onto it. Of course, they kind of make up my toolkit, so to say, or what I can hear or can imagine, because that is limited. Like, even by, you can't imagine stuff we don't like have words for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And my battery's getting low. But and there is cultures where they don't have a word for other. So they can't even imagine there is any separation, because they don't have the whole construct of thought around that. There's not existing. And there's cultures that don't have separate words for time and place. So they can't imagine, that those are two separate things. They can't even talk about it. I think that's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, it's a very again, I think it's all. So it goes back to the idea that sort of all the constructs work, and the trick is to alter your construct just enough that you don't get wiped out, basically. Well, because if
I
you
mean,
do
that's of course, like, the basic goal, surviving.
it,
But once you got that down, you can do more interesting stuff with creating constructs in order to do something else,
yeah, I
than
think
just not die.
you. I see it as like a way. So essentially, you're trying to navigate your way through all of this, and if you alter the construct too radically, you lose all your markers, and nothing makes sense anymore. And so
Yeah.
you can't navigate. You lose you become directionless.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting yourself just enough.
Yeah.
That it's got, you want a little bit of chaos and a little bit of the other. And on a mundane thing, as we've talked about this before, as being self-employed, you want just enough challenge, but just enough certainty all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah, exactly.
day thing. And I think, if you introduce too much chaos,
I have to
sorry.
I have to think now about an experience I had recently when taking a psychedelic called rapé.
Okay.
And I got quite the dose, and that I mean, I completely lost sense of any construct, and it was so confusing.
Yeah.
That it really made me sick.
Yeah. Well, that's just the thing.
That's the thing. Because I was kind of. I mean, the only way I can describe it was I was feeling weird for being a human, because I felt like, but I'm not any different than any plant. That why then can I move? And what's this strange thing with hands? And oh my god,
that's the most.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got quite the dose. Fucking brilliant. I love that. It's one of the best sentences ever. It was quite the dose. I thought
I had no idea what was going to happen. It was my first encounter with that specific drug.
Sure. Yeah. So did you? Did it make you feel uneasy feeling like that? I mean, obviously, did you feel physically sick or frightened?
At first, I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing! This feels so good." And at first, I was just really like, "Wow, this is so interesting." But then it got too weird pretty soon.
Yeah.
And that took me pretty far out, in the terms of, I was not enjoyable anymore, and I was just too kind of confused, and then you get all sorts of bodily reactions trying to get you out of that, basically.
Yeah. Well, I think if you lose your ability to navigate, then safety mechanisms kick in.
Yeah, that's I think what was happening.
Yeah, because you become in danger then. So
at least you think so. I mean, if I would have had this experience before, or if I would now have the same experience again, I think perhaps I would know, like, I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Maybe, or I would, have some advice on, okay, so if this happens, then do that or whatever. I was guided really well, though, I must say, but I guess he also didn't know how it was gonna hit me like that. But yeah.
I'm gonna know you turned into a plant.
I really felt like one.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, that's the sort of feeling of interconnectedness, and I also wonder, like, whether that. I mean, you've got the sort of day-to-day survival mechanism of, like, shit, I don't know what's going on, I might get attacked.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, if you get too close to what's really happening, the thought that just came into my head is, does your mind just fucking dissolve? Because I know. But that's what I thought. I'm like, if you get that far in,
I mean,
there's a reason you retain the separateness to some degree, or retain the ability to observe what you're doing. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I just, because a lot of people chase that kind of thing. It's like, I've got to see what's really there. And I've got this feeling that if you got that close to it, you just sort of go, and disappear in a puff of logic. I don't know. It's but yeah.
Yeah.
Right. How's your battery doing?
I think I just plugged it into power socket in order to
Good.
save it from dying on us.
So I think we'll give it a couple of more minutes, but I think was there anything we wanted to pick up on? Anything particular? Or have we gone weird enough? The question.
We've gone pretty weird.
Really? We can go weirder. But I think the thing I wanted to ask was when you were playing and you had to wait for that next note to come along before you did anything.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were being led?
Yeah.
Because I've had that when I'm playing, when like the instrument's playing you, where you kind of
I don't know if that's then the instrument or you've invoked whatever.
Sure. I wonder because it goes back to the whole the sort of the quote unquote true will thing. I don't really, so with a lot of these ideas, I don't generally buy into them wholesale, but I think they have a grain of truth to them.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that like there was a bit of you maybe directing what you were doing, or that you'd got out of the way and allowed it to take over.
Right. I think that's mainly that felt most what was happening.
Yeah.
Get out of the way of it.
And what
and whether then, some people would call it like, divine inspiration, some kind of higher power or whatever. But I think that's again a semantics thing.
What do you think? What do you think it is?
Wow.
Got to answer the question.
What do I think? I mean, in the end, I think everything we call gods and goddesses are reflections of ourselves. Like that's it's no separate entity.
Yeah.
So to say. I mean, you can consciously connect with that, and that's called possession if you want to do that. But that's not what that was.
Have you ever had that sort of experience whilst playing?
Possession? No.
I have.
Yeah, what is that like?
It's not like anything. It's not unpleasant. And again, I'm using it as a sort of, it's when I very much feel like I'm just watching myself. But it's kind of happening on its own.
Right.
So maybe maybe again the way I'm interpreting it, but it didn't.
Yeah.
It felt like I didn't have to do anything.
It
was just happening for me.
Yeah.
But
not by you. So nothing that felt like you.
Yeah. Nothing that I would, on a day-to-day thing, describe as me. I was watching, but I wasn't there. I think, what does that mean? It was very different, and I've had it a couple of times, and it's more to do with kind of a perception of distance from my body, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it again.
So maybe you would call what I've experienced, you would call that possession.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe. I definitely. This is why I asked. You see, because we talked about the true will thing. And I want to know if I was possessed, Vika, and I'm just making sure other people are possessed as well, so I feel better about it, basically. Now, when we were talking about the true will thing, that because I've had it that sort of thing a few times, and that's what it feels like. Something else is doing it, but I wouldn't know what that is, and all I can tell you is it feels like I'm watching myself, even though I'm here. I suppose it feels like I'm back a little bit. Very difficult to do. I feel like I'm not occupying the space I normally occupy. Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, I we're much bigger than the edges of our bodies anyway.
Well, right. See this. Okay, so this is the bit we need to continue the next time we do this. Remember that sentence. We're bigger than the edges of our bodies, and that was why I asked you about because I think there's probably something to that, and like what I'm really interested in is how that comes out. I like when it comes out, because it definitely comes out for me when I play music.
Yeah.
And it comes out for me when I'm lifting weights as well.
Right.
Which, you know, not in quite the same way. There's a lot more noise and clanging, but but that concept, I think. Do you think that's a good one for next
I would
time?
like that, in combination with seeing how the Scandinavian shamans looked at this. I think the combination could be interesting, because they have ideas about that too. And words for those things.
What was the sentence again? About the edges of our bodies, our minds extend beyond the edge.
No, not as our minds. We extend beyond the edges of our bodies.
Okay. Yeah. Write that down.
I will.
Because it's really good. I really like that. Cool. Okay. I think that's a good place to leave it for this evening. Yeah.
That was lovely.
Fantastic. That was really fun. Cool. So I'll see you next time.
Yes. See you next time. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.